Wishing your man was more dominant in the bedroom? Well, today we're going to talk about 5 steps that you can use that are rooted in his psychology to encourage him and draw out that strong masculine dominance that you've been craving. I'm Brandon the Dom, and let's dive in. Look, I totally get it. I hear it all the time, again and again, from women that wish their man was more dominant. You wish you'd be more confident, assertive, and take charge and direction in the relationship, and especially in the bedroom. Yes, you love that he's kind and is caring and that he loves you. Of course, that's wonderful. We all want that. But you crave him to completely own and do ungodly, terrible things to you in the bedroom. Respectfully, of course. But how do you make him more dominant? Well, the short answer, you can't. Just like he can't make you do anything. None of us can control each other unless we want to be controlled. None of us can control us and tell us what to do. We all have free will. The only thing that we have control over in our lives is our own actions and behaviors. However, this doesn't mean that you need to lose hope and start freaking out and just write it off. There's a lot that you can do to influence him, putting the odds in your favor of him choosing to be more dominant. And this influence is actually a great source of power for you as a submissive. There's a lot of people that believe dominance is a trait that you just have or you don't. Basically, you are dominant or you're never going to be it. And honestly, I think that's crap. I don't buy it for 1 second. In fact, everything about dominance can be learned. On my website, I have a lot of material for guys to develop their dominance. However, you can't walk the walk for him. He's the one that's going to have to take the steps and learn the skills to actually be dominant. Because the first step of becoming dominant is taking 100% responsibility for your life. And you can't do that for him. That will make you his mother rather than his submissive. However, you can help encourage and increase the likelihood that he's going to do that. But before we get to 5 steps that you can take, I want to show you the man's perspective. See, for most men in today's society, we're actually socially conditioned to go against being dominant. From the time we're young, we've been taught to treat women equally, to be kind, to be caring, and to not impose ourselves too much on them. And this is further exacerbated by the fact that many young boys are raised in fatherless homes, meaning that the mother is the majority influence on that young boy's social conditioning. And of course, a mom is going to teach you to treat a woman like a lady. Now, the problem is not that we're treating women better or that we've made large strides in women's rights over the years. That is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's a great benefit. The problem with social conditioning for anything that you're teaching is it starts to generalize and lump things into one category. And unfortunately, social conditioning for boys is it lumps a lot of masculine and dominant traits into one category and labels it as toxic. And unfortunately, that means it doesn't help that young boy to discern what it means to be a dominant leader versus being a domineering tyrant. Furthermore, a lot of that social conditioning uses collective shame, so using the way that everybody in society is supposed to view something in order to repress our individual desires. And this is for both sides, men and women, dominant and submissive. And everybody just swallows that collective ideology rather than expressing their true individual desires. Now, being raised with a single mom and also having a trait high in conscientiousness, I know this all too well for myself. I can recall back to a time, the very first time that I felt any dominant inclination coming, and I was pinning my ex-wife's wrist down to the bed. She's squirming around, playfully, trying to resist. And I had this overwhelming feeling of wanting to completely ravish her. And then rather than instantly acting on that, I felt this wave of shame just hit me like a semi-truck. I have all these thoughts going on in my head, like, what's wrong with me? I'm not supposed to treat her like this. Why is it that I kind of like it? What kind of monster am I? And it basically took me many years and experiences to unravel, and walking through that seemingly mindfuck that being selfish is actually being selfless in this moment. That she actually gets pleasure from being submissive, and therefore I'm denying her that pleasure if I don't act on my desires. The real point in BDSM is that as long as she's consenting, she craves me to completely own my desires, to not hold back, to not hesitate, to act on what I want. And I'm sure you share similar desires, where you want him to lose control, you want him to fuck you like an animal, you want him to destroy you and own you and take you with his entire being. And then most importantly, to be able to quickly regain control if you were to say stop. It takes us men a moment to figure out, realize, and accept that you want this completely. But beyond that, there's a whole list of fears that a guy has to address before he can fully act on those dominant desires. They're often afraid that you'll think they're a terrible person. They might be afraid that they're going to physically hurt you or break you. They're afraid that if they give in to these desires, they're not going to be able to control themselves or pull themselves back. They might be afraid that they don't know what they're doing, they're going to mess up. And they might be afraid that if they show you this side of themselves, that you're going to leave the relationship. You're going to find it disgusting, overwhelming, and basically completely reject them. The number one thing that you can do, if you can only take one thing away from this entire video, is repeatedly to reassure him that you want this, that you want him to be dominant, that you want him to act on those desires. Not only that you want it, but you need it, that you crave it. This is not only going to help him work through those mental hurdles, but you're essentially helping to deprogram him from what society has conditioned him. And in fact, you're actually training him to be more dominant through behavioral conditioning. Behavioral conditioning is basically a process whereby a response becomes more frequent or more predictable in a given environment as a result of reinforcement. With reinforcement typically being something that's a stimulus or reward for a desired response. In this case, him being more dominant. So every time that your man acts more dominant, and then you reassure him, you encourage him, you reward him for doing so, he's more likely to do that behavior again in the future. So with that understanding, now let's get into the 5 steps. Because basically what you're going to be doing in these 5 steps is encouraging him and rewarding him along the way. So step 1 is pretty simple. It's express your desire for him to be dominant. The plain simple truth is people can't read minds. Yet when it comes to sex and relationships, we just expect our partners to know what we need, what we desire, without us ever having to say it. And this is just a recipe for needs going unmet and then us getting bitter or resentful towards our partners. And you might find it surprising just how incredibly helpful it is to hear that you actually want him to be dominant. In fact, for some men, this is all they're going to need. They just need to hear that this is what you want. Now, when you do communicate with us, do not nag or criticize us in the process, telling us how we're never dominant, how we're not dominant enough, whatever. It's the fastest way to make us feel emasculated and pissed off all at the same time. Instead, you need to use encouragement and make it enticing. You can also help by expressing what being dominant looks like to you and how it makes you feel. Tell him what sort of actions and behaviors feel dominant to you, and tell him how you want to feel in the bedroom. The problem is when you just tell him to be dominant, it's a very vague word. It can mean a lot of different things. And dominance actually looks different to different people. Now, part of the reason that we often don't communicate with our partners is because we don't even know ourselves. We're unsure what we need or want. And if that happens to be you, I have a few different resources on my website. One of them being the 3 tools to discover your turn-ons, so you know exactly what's going to turn you on, and then using the 5 tools to communicate your turn-ons. I also made a video about filling out a sex menu, and a sex menu is basically like a giant list of different sexual acts and different dominant acts that he might do to you, and you can go through and say how much you desire that and what it looks like for you. It's very easy to use. I even have a template on my website, so I'll link that video down below. By you doing this, you're basically giving him the keys to the kingdom, telling him exactly what turns you on and what's going to help you get deeper into that submission. And I promise that if you do that, he's going to have more directions. He doesn't have to think about and guess what it is that you want, and you'll both be more happy that you did communicate that. All right, step 2 is to give him more opportunities to take the lead. This may seem obvious, but if you want him to take more control, you're going to have to give up control. Now, I'm not saying that you need to give him control of your entire life right off the bat. You have no idea if he'll be able to handle that. Instead, start small, give him a little bit of control, and every time that he's successful in taking responsibility for that control, then you're able to give over more next time. An excellent way to start this process is just to say to him, I'd like you to choose for me, and saying it in a very smiley, non-confrontational, playful way. You're not trying to test him, you're encouraging him. So for example, you can ask him to choose what to wear for you. You can ask him to choose what you should eat when you're out on a date, or you can ask him to plan a date, a weekend, or an entire trip together. Now, when you do this, he might not be used to choosing for you, especially if it's the first time you've ever asked him to do so. And he's likely to say, I don't know what you want. It's important at this moment to not get annoyed, not get angry, and to reassure him that you'd still like him to choose, and tell him how it makes you feel when he's taking control. Then, if he chooses something and you don't like it, this is not the time to berate him for making the wrong choice. Remember, the entire point of this exercise is to be putting yourself into a situation that allows his dominant personality traits to shine, and to reinforce that you trust his opinion. He's likely to make mistakes in the beginning, making choices that you necessarily wouldn't have made for yourself. But over time, as you keep encouraging him, maybe giving him small reminders of things that you actually desire so he can help, make the right choice, he's going to get more attuned to you, and he's going to build up confidence in making decisions. All right, step 3 is to act submissive. So dominance and submission kind of act on a spectrum, being two opposite ends. And the more that you're submissive, or the more that you act submissive, it's going to polarize that, and it's going to draw more dominance out of your partner, and it's going to basically, pull on that spectrum. And this process is basically like seducing the dominance out of your partner. So some ways that you can think about acting more submissive is to adopt more submissive body language. You can be more soft, relaxed, flowy, and showcasing the vulnerable parts of your body, like your neck and chest. You can also put yourself into submissive positions. So whenever possible, put yourself below him. Kneel, bend over, or engage in acts that are of service and that submissives often do, like giving a foot massage. Speaking of service, you can also serve without being asked. So perform little tasks that just make his life easier. Ask him what you can do to help, especially when he's taking the lead in something that you've given control over on. And just generally ramp up the amount of acts of service that you're doing. And then remember what I said earlier in the video, to basically give him reassurance and appreciation to him. And that would look like saying things like, I love that I can trust in you to decide what's best for me. I feel safe when I'm around you. You make me feel really special. These sorts of affirmations help him to understand that his dominant traits and his dominant qualities are desirable and appreciated by you. And then I also recommend watching the video that I made on the essential behaviors for a good submissive. Doing those behaviors are going to draw out their complementary behaviors from the dominant. Basically, what you're doing in this process is giving him more opportunities, saying, hey, I'm the submissive, to allow him to be the dominant, and demonstrating that there's rewards for doing so. That reward being, if he acts more dominant, he'll see more behaviors like this from you. All right, step 4 is to be more sexually forward. So yes, most of the time, the dominant is the one that's going to be more sexually forward and going to initiate things. However, that doesn't mean that you can't be a little more sexually forward and initiate on your end. The reason being is this demonstrates your sexual appetite. You're basically saying, hello, I would like some of this from you. So some things that you can do is suggesting naughty places to have sex, dressing up provocatively to show off your body. You can beg him, saying things like, I want you to fuck me, or please, please, please just take me. You can crawl across his lap and say something like, I've been very, very naughty. Do you think I need some spankings? You can playfully grab at his body, at his crotch, and just be overall cheeky about wanting to play. You can drop to your knees for a blowjob without command, or do something like get on the bed on your hands and knees and your ass in the air. Remember, you're putting yourself into very submissive positions, making it very clear what you want. Yes, you'll be taking the initiative in the beginning, but over time, he'll start to get the idea, and seeing you physically and verbally begging to be treated in this way gives him reassurance that you really, really want this. Then he'll start to gradually learn how to increase his own sexual dominance, which I also made a video for as well, linked down below. All right, the last step number 5, is to encourage and praise him. This is basically the bread and butter of where behavioral conditioning comes in. Remember, conditioning is basically a process where a response becomes more frequent when it is rewarded. If your man exhibits the dominant behaviors that you want him to have, then tell him that you like that he's doing that. You're going to create a positive feedback loop by letting him know the qualities that you admire. In fact, here's a little secret. just between you and I, me and you, not telling anybody else, okay? Doms also have a praise king. In fact, one of a man's favorite things to hear in life is good job. The reason for this is it comes from societal programming that many men base their value upon what they do in the world. And this is actually one facet or conception of what the self is, especially for a man. And he's going to have to do a lot to learn how to untangle his own self-value and his worth from what he does in the world. That's only one aspect. However, for the majority of men, this is exactly what they base their self-worth on, how well they do something in the world. So anytime that he acts dominant, essentially what I want you to do is tell him good job. Except you're not going to say it like that because it's going to sound extremely condescending if you just say straight up good job. Instead, it's going to sound something like this. It feels so good when you do that. I love it when you pull my hair. I love being your little slut. Please, I want more of that. I really loved it when you spanked my ass that way, or I really loved it when you did X, Y, and Z. God, your cock feels so good when you're fucking me from behind. When you held me down, I just got so wet, or it turned me on so much when you told me what to do. And each of those examples, you're basically showing some response that you had to a quality that he did that he is also really going to enjoy. He wants to know that you're getting wet. He wants to know that you're getting turned on every time he's doing one of these dominant acts. Of course, some of these things may be hard for you to say, and a lot of times dirty talk is something that's difficult for anybody to do. So being very sexually expressive with your body, with your breathing, by moaning and gasping are also great ways to say good job without actually having to say any words about it. I promise that every time he sees you in the throes of pleasure, he's feeling pretty good about himself. Basically, the whole point is the more expressive you are about encouraging him, the more he's going to showcase and express those dominant traits. And the happier that you're both going to be about the situation. So if you want your man to be more dominant in the bedroom, don't feel like you're completely powerless in this situation, and don't feel like that you're completely powerless as a submissive. In fact, your influence holds a ton of power. Now, if developing dominance is something that you and your man are actively working on together, I would love to hop on a call with both of you. I actually do coaching for couples around helping the man to develop their dominance and a woman to sink more into her submission. But if you're also just working on this on your own, maybe developing your own submission, or if you're a man watching this video to develop your dominance, I would love to jump on a coaching call with you as well. I'll leave a link for that below to my coaching calendar, and we can get scheduled. In the meantime, earlier in the video, I mentioned that developing his dominance is going to be his responsibility to do, and specifically developing his sexual dominance. I recommend watching this video that's going to help walk through what some of these sexually dominant acts could look like and the different levels that he can walk through, starting at a place that may be more comfortable for him rather than jumping into the extreme dominant end. So watch that video, schedule a coaching call. Thank you so much for your time and attention.